Welcome to Echelon's She Slays edition. Today we're going to be talking about something very fun, but also something that we've not always heard. We'll be speaking about how to slay your imposter, which is a topic that we've kept, I think, hidden in the closet, even though we see it every now and then. But this is a topic that I think is happening to maybe most of us, but also we don't know. Let me start by introducing the panelists that I have. I have two lovely ladies, and I am so excited that we have a gentleman on the panelists. So we'll start with Dananjaya Hettiarachchi. He's an HRD specialist and a coach. Then we'll move on to Nisreen Rehmanjee. She is the head of corporate finance, group tax, and social entrepreneurship project at John Keel's group. And we have Minoli Wickramasinghe, who is the CEO of Capital Trust Properties. So let me start by talking about a little bit on the imposter syndrome, because I do know that most of you guys had to do a little bit of searching, a little bit of reading, and I'm pretty sure you know about this a little bit because you handle a lot of, I think it'll come out a little wrong if I say you handle a lot of women and men, but keeping it a little light, trying to see or trying to understand what's an imposter syndrome. So let me just phrase a little bit here so our viewers, whoever is going to be seeing this, would know what it is. Basically, it is when you start self-doubting yourself and you have these questions about whether you should be here, or is it just luck that has brought you into this framework. And if it is a question where we would want to sit down and ask, there are like famous fours around it where you can really see anxiety and you can see yourself being the perfectionist. You can also see fear of, failure, where you just fear that, you fail in something and you would not want to take risks, and lack of confidence. So let's start with you, Dananjaya. I'd like to know, is it something to do with lack of confidence, or is it just a conversation that you just build up in your head and you're just thinking as a business leader, how would it be for a person that you would be coaching?
Yeah, so that's a very, very interesting question. I think at a very base level, I think the imposter syndrome is a sense of undeservingness. You don't feel like you deserve what you have, and it could be your identity in society, it could be the social narrative that's around you, your accomplishments. So general sense of kind of undeservingness. And there's a common misconception that people who are not successful have an imposter syndrome, right? It's not the case. If you look at the bell curve of performance, now I work with the top 0.01% of performance in different fields, they still have this feeling of undeservedness, right? And I think it doesn't have in some cases, imposter syndrome leads to a lack of confidence in the latter part. If you're starting out your career, so on and so forth. But once you go to the top 10% of your profession, it's not about confidence. It's about, do I really want to do this? It manifests in different ways as opposed to a lack of confidence. Am I worthy of this award? Am I worthy of this honor? Am I worthy of setting foot on this spectrum? So I think it depends on where you are in your career, and it manifests in different ways.
So have you seen this in people that have actually, achieved quite a lot and they still sit down and question themselves?
Absolutely. I work with a lot of athletes. I work with a lot of CEOs and scientists, and also kind of social entrepreneurs around the world. And they're the top of their game. Right? I mean, you won't find these people anywhere really great at what they do. However, they also realize it, but it's just the acknowledgement on the feeling that I'm grateful for being who I am and I deserve this. That narrative is what's missing. And there could be many reasons for it. But, a constant theme that pops up in the manifestation of this is that early childhood, when they're growing up, they've been in an environment where they've had negatively reinforcing feedback, which later on manifests as a narrative in your head saying you don't deserve it.
Yeah, because there is when you really read through and you see, there's a lot of context behind it when you either are abused or you're just told that in the terms of, you're not great, you're not doing enough, or you start hearing those things. And I significantly put that thing aside, but yeah, I'm happy that you brought it up. Nisreen, to you, how do you think women overthink, or do you think it's just a thing that I'm going to be coming back to Dananjaya because
Sure.
this is a very interesting question. I want to ask him, does he overthink? But to you, do you think women overthink this, term, or has it been a thing that, you kind of overthink and you put this syndrome onto you? In your views, I'd love to know your thoughts.
Okay, so, like I had mentioned to you, I hadn't really heard that term imposter syndrome too much in and around the people I associate with, including the men in and around what's successful as well. So I was just thinking to myself, do I think that? Do I introspect and think that I don't deserve? But to be honest, I don't think there has been ever a time when I have sat down and thought, I don't deserve it, because I know that I worked very hard for where I am. Because it was a very intellectual kind of feel, and maybe it helped. So picking up something Dananjaya said, my childhood, the way my parents dealt with us, and it was myself and my two brothers, was that it was never about being first, second, third in class or benchmarking against someone else. The only question they would ever ask us, be it in relation to sports or academics, was, did you do the best you could do? If you've done that, that's it. Right? So my father or mother would never worry too much about whether we were first, second, third in class. They didn't care. Actually, they didn't care. And I'm not just saying that for the sake of saying it. So that gave us a lot of confidence as we were growing up, not to question ourselves too much, other than putting a very high benchmark for ourselves. So we set our benchmark. It was not about measuring myself against someone else or whatever. So in that context, as I went up the rung and achieved whatever successes I have, it was because I worked towards it. So there was never a question. Yes, there were times when you were in the right place at the right time and things came your way, right? And also there were times when, you wanted something, but it was not the right time, or you were in the wrong place. That could happen as well. But it was never where I questioned myself saying I was not capable, or it was because something lacking in me that I didn't get it. So I honestly, I've not encountered it in my context. And thinking of the other ladies that I worked with, maybe because we are more technocrats, I don't know. But I don't think any of them, if I ask them the question, would think, I don't deserve where I am. Most probably they might actually say that I should have gotten here faster, rather than not deserving it. So it's slightly different perspective to
That's fantastic to actually hear. Moving to you, Minoli. Being in a real estate industry, and which is a male-dominant industry as we know, how is your self-doubting thoughts? Like I've had this chat with you, and I would like to use so that we would also get to know a little bit more, because it's fantastic to see this perspective and then Dananjaya's perspective over it, and we'd like to hear yours.
Okay, so just to recap of how I started off. Actually in 2010, Capital Trust was primarily a stockbroking company. So I actually started the real estate arm in 2010 with one employee, and we started the transactional arm. By then, no one knew the word JLL or what they did, or any global agents by then. So this was something, I had a passion for, and I, went for that, right? Along the way, I felt that since it was so male-oriented, it was not regulated. There was like a lot of, there were things that were happening. Certain transactions were not going because it was getting bypassed, since it's not regulated. So that actually was, you start doubting, are you in the correct industry, right? So I think that is, I don't know if that is called this, the syndrome that you're calling it.
But we have been where you sit down and you think about it. And also, when you have baby steps in your journey and you don't really see it then, but then when you come to a certain point, you start looking back
and I think I was in all male-dominated fields because I started off much before that, at the shipping industry, where I was one of the, at Maersk, where I was one of the primary employees there. So I started in the financial field, right? So there it was 99% male oriented. So in real estate also it was male oriented. And I built that to a state where now we work with 3 global agents. And I have done transactions that are like, that I have changed the entire sphere of real estate. So we do most of the transactions right now. And I also head the Capital Trust Holdings, certain sectors. So now I do the expansion for the securities in terms of market expansion, stuff like that, yeah.
Getting back to you, Dananjaya, like I said, I'd like to ask you this question. Do you think men are overthinkers in any way?
I think if you have a certain amount of, it really depends on the depth of how your introspection.
Nisreen is looking at you like dead straight.
Interesting. This is going to be interesting.
You better have a good.
I think overthinking is a manifestation of a deep attribute. Right? I think there are some people, if you have a strong introspection, if you have a strong self-awareness, you can see this manifestation of overthinking happening. But if it's not that depth, if you're not very introspective, if you don't really kind of have that emotional aptitude and awareness about, you don't think about things, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it really connects to what your base attributes are, and it affects you in different ways. Mm-hmm. For example, Nisreen was talking about, one manifestation is lack of, you don't feel you deserve it. Right? Another manifestation of imposter syndrome is that halfway through your career, you realize like, what am I doing? You could be a CEO, you could be a coach, a teacher, and you're like, my job has no meaning, right? I'm not contributing to society. And you go into this self-narrative of, literally looking at your whole life's, body of work and saying, I've not done anything. I've been an imposter throughout my life. And that's also a consequence of overthinking it, right? If you overthink something to a certain degree, you find nothing, right? And part of becoming, part of diagnosing yourself as imposter syndrome can be because of that. And a lot of people actually do that.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, do you have people come up to you and say, look, man, I'm just thinking that, I'm doubting this investment, and they're talking about, it could be millions or whatever. And I think you'd get what I'm trying to say, where you coach these people, you try to tell them, okay, you can take a risk, but you cannot take a risk. But they also start self-doubting their perspective behind it. How do you handle that?
I think in this particular case, that in the 2 types of individuals I work with are a lot of professionals who are at the top of their game, but they don't see the meaning in their job. Mm-hmm. Right? They've literally feel that they've lost the passion for their job, and therefore they extrapolate it backwards or
These are young people that you're talking about, is it?
Not necessarily young. I think they're kind of mid-age to senior level executives, and they have all the money in the world, they have all the stuff in the world, but they've lost connection with their purpose, right? And then they work back, and that lack of that purpose is filled by a narrative saying, "Hey, you've been an imposter throughout your life," right? And the second group of people that I work with are people who are taking their career from local to global. Right, so you're industry expert in your area, your country, and now you're going into a global audience. And now it's not you doubt your skill, you doubt the fact whether you can create an outcome in a different environment, right? So for example, if you're Indian or maybe a Pakistani or a Sri Lankan or Asian, now you're going and speaking or trying to lead a company in Netherlands or in Germany, right? And we come from a era of being colonized, right? And you have this mindset that white people are superior than brown people. Now suddenly you're like, who am I to go and lead a group of white people in the middle of Europe, right?
Have you ever felt that?
Who, me? Yeah, of course. I think when I went from
I'm trying to narrow the walls down a little bit.
Yeah, from regional to when I started speaking in Europe and in the US, mm-hmm. I think the narrative was there predominantly. Yeah, I was like, why would white people listen to me? And it's a myth you need to bust by doing it, right? So, and after a while, when you start getting feedback and when you start, one of the beauty of trial and error is you realize everybody's fundamentally the same irrespective of your skin color, mm-hmm. right? So you get over that syndrome or get over that mindset by really not only taking the risk, but getting the feedback at the end of the day.
All right. I would like to know your perspective behind it, because I have known people that have the imposter syndrome. It's very interesting to see that, you very firmly say that, no, I'm in my shoes and I'm running. I'm taking the lead. I would like to know, do you appreciate your baby steps, from the time that you've started your career, and now that you've grown to this person that is leading, a group, a team? How do you feel? Do you actually sit down to think about your baby steps and actually appreciate the factor that you've actually come through that journey, and also question?
Actually, in my case, it was a huge leap at the beginning, and then the baby steps sort of came into play, because I went from an accounts trainee to a director within 6 years at KPMG. So I was a director at 28. And I was responsible for the tax compliances or tax planning for 50% of the listed companies in the country. So it came really fast. That is where I said that whilst I was capable, there was also luck involved. And this is not about me, questioning myself, but I think it happened too fast. I should have had that opportunity to take the baby steps, because sometimes technically you may be there, but maybe emotionally, is your emotional quotient there to take that kind of responsibility, because people who were my bosses ended up reporting to me. So that's a challenging environment. But from then onwards, I think in my career, it's been amazing journey, to be honest. I think throughout my career, things have been just thrown at me, which has taken me outside my comfort zone. So I remember one was KPMG, being promoted too fast, and I swam. I didn't sink, I swam, so that was fine. And then leaving KPMG, joining John Keel's, which was very different kind of culture. So again, you're like trying to figure out how do you sort of navigate this. And then I was at one point in time told to go around the country and look for property. It was like so out of my comfort zone. It was nothing to do with tax. But for me, it was a challenge. It was something new I should take on. I did no clue about it. But I think sometimes your supervisors also give you that comfort, saying that, you're intelligent, you'll figure it out. Take the risk, just go and get it done. So did that. Then 2 years later, I was told, go to India and spend 3 years there. And we were running a BPO there. So I was head of corporate functions for 700 people, all Indians. So about what you were saying. And it was something I had absolutely no clue about, because I was head of tax, and here I was head of corporate functions, responsible for almost everything other than operations, co-operations. So it was a shift in terms of I was in my work area. I was, I think, technically one of the, I was confident about my ability. But when I went to India, everything was new. Everything was a new learning. But that's where I think my childhood helped, because I didn't put pressure on myself to say that I don't know. I went with the mindset that I don't know, so I'm here to learn. And I told my team as well. I said, guys, you guys know more than I do. So I'm going to learn from you. So if you're comfortable in your skin in that sense, I think the doubts don't creep up, because you are quite comfortable telling them, I don't know how this works. Please tell me or teach me how it works. And just have confidence in your intellect to say that I'll figure it out. And then when I came back to Sri Lanka, again took over tax. And then 3 years ago, I was told take on corporate finance. No, actually 2 years after that, I was told to take on Plasticycle, which is a social entrepreneurship project. Again, nothing I knew about. Took it on. And then 2 years later, I was told to take corporate finance. So it's always been someone saying, just go and get it done. And me trying to figure out, okay, how do I get it done? So I actually didn't have too much of time for self-doubt, because I was constantly learning and figuring out how to do things. So I didn't have time to sit down and think, okay, have I got it right or not?
There is an interesting question that I have lined up for you, but before that, I'll move on to Minoli a little bit. Because you see, when you actually start self-doubting yourself, you also start thinking and try and also become like a perfectionist, right? So how does it feel to have a perfectionist around you, or how would you take that as a positive impact?
So in my case, it's a very different scenario where I and my husband are in this business. So he's more into the securities while I hit the real estate arm. And he is more a perfectionist while I am more opportunistic and more a strategist.
Okay.
So actually, when the stock markets were doing really badly, we went into real estate correctly at the correct time. And that was something that was a very good thing for the group, right? So every move that I made was quite a positive step for the company. I think the results showed otherwise. Like, when you have a male in this equation, in Sri Lanka, I feel I was having a chat with Nisreen also. It's in Asia, I guess. Like, the general public will praise the male figure and underestimate the female.
I'm sorry,
So-
Dananjaya.
That always happens in our society, I feel, because I studied in Australia where I excelled in my education, and then I excelled beyond even the Aussies. And it was like they would challenge me, and then I would go ahead and challenge them. So that sort of person. I was very pushy. So even in the company, like if I thought certain things have to be done, I was very pushy. For instance, there was a land that we had to acquire, and it was in the middle of nowhere. It was where actually the cinnamon life was going to be, and my husband was like, "What is this land? Why do you want to buy this?" I said,
I was
"No."
just going to ask you, I mean, how do you sit down and risk all that, and then suddenly you wait for it to happen, and then...
So I have this, I don't know, intuition. I have this passion for real estate, and I know I could forward think what would happen in 3 or 4 years. So I knew this land was going to be really precious and it will appreciate, and I was like, no, I want it.
Okay.
And I stood by it, and here we are, like, this huge development has come in the middle of it. So those investments actually we did for the company that just made us now a conglomerate what we are.
All right. So we've also known that, the imposter syndrome actually has a section where you can really reframe your conversation. You can reframe your structure. It's basically taking out like another old picture and having like a nice gold frame around it. And you have a new story to tell about. You have a new story to talk about. It's basically in the cognitive science of psychology. I'd like to pose this question to you. How does it feel like if you had to reframe somebody in terms of coaching? Like, how would it be?
Yeah, I think reframing happens a lot with just figuring out the fallacies and the falseness in the assumptions that you all believe, right? So we all have a set of assumptions that create our worldview, right? And just drawing from what Minoli said and Nisreen said, we believe that confidence is an attribute to demonstrate skill, which is not the case. If you look at some of the greatest athletes in the world, maybe Usain Bolt to Michael Phelps, and whenever they go into the Olympics, I mean, they're as nervous as you and I are. Right? And so there is a fallacy there that confidence helps you demonstrate your skill better. In fact, there is more empirical evidence that if you're overconfident, you'll demonstrate it worse, right? So part of reframing is looking at the assumptions and really testing and seeing the deeper truth in those assumptions, right? So we as a society, we believe in assumptions, right? We like practice makes you perfect. Is that true? Or does perfect practice make you
So
perfect?
you're actually saying that it happens here?
No, think about it, right? So we've all heard practice makes you perfect.
Yes.
Or does perfect practice make you perfect? Completely two different things, right? If you practice something badly, you're going to be good at it badly. You're going to be the best in the world badly. But if you get a perfect practice, that's what leads to perfection. So that's the example of a fallacy that we believe in, right? And for example, picking up from what Minoli said is that, so the women, women have a tougher time. Like women aren't celebrated when they do their hard work, right? Is that a truth? Or is that as a society, we have this crab mentality and pulling down people? And okay, being a woman is just a manifestation of pulling down. Being black is a manifestation of pulling down, right? So you have a label you attach to a deep attitude that runs through society. Is that the truth? So you investigate the truth, and then when you figure out the fallacy, that allows you to reframe yourself.
Right. And for you, I mean, like Dananjaya just brought this up before I could even ask a question. Thank you for that. But opposite sex, like you said, it's more appreciative. And when you've come across all this throughout your journey, how have you overcome it? And you're seated here to tell me the story, so I'd like to know a little bit more about it.
So there was another instance I will tell you, is that we had this huge lease transaction that we were going to do, and a huge another sort of a global agent bypassed us, right? After a lot of months and months of due diligence that we did. So I was like, I didn't know how this happened. And I just asked my husband, what shall I do? And he was just silent. He didn't know what, because this has happened over and over, and he was just silent on what I should do. So I was like, I felt really hopeless. Where am I going to fall to? And I thought, no, I was so motivated that I had done everything professionally. I had acted ethically. I had done a lot of hard work, and I was not going to give it up for unethicality in any way. So I called India to my global agent as well as the multinational, and I said, how did this happen? I mean, I did months and months of due diligence. We chose the locations. How did this company just come and bypass us? And they understood, that they couldn't go without us. And the landlords gave in. My global agent supported, and I forged ahead. So I think
that's when overthinking starts to work, because you're in it, and you're like,
you're motivated.
You're motivated. I want to do
and
it.
I think women have that because they have to work extra hard to do that.
Do you hear that?
Do you
hear that?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I challenged, and that global agent just told me, I mean, this has never been done before. You have done something that in India, they used to bulldoze us. This company bulldozes us through. And you've done something that is incredible.
Fantastic.
So those are the things that I think
really pulled you through. Nisreen, for you, since your perspective on this topic is very different, I'd like to know if you see somebody in your team who you've, maybe it would happen now, in the future.
I most probably observe it better, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
But would you let it be stagnant and not, tease the brain to see, what it brings? Or would you have a chat and say, okay, there is something like this, and you're just being an imposter, you suddenly come out of it? Or would you just, ignore and not talk about it because you wouldn't want to bring that aspect and just want them to be just like you?
See, I think maybe we are overthinking it also, like, Dananjaya said. So I think all of us, so I'm not saying that I haven't had self-doubt, but I'm not putting a label on it and creating a issue, making it a bigger than it needs to be, right? There are, always it may not be technical skills, but it may be soft skills. You do question yourself, but not in terms of doubting myself. It doesn't get to that level. So if I'm dealing with any one of my team members, be it male or female, and mind you, these kind of doubts, I think one of the fallacies is that only women sort of have this. So, and this happens even now, sometimes I push people, beyond their comfort zones, and they're like, can I do it? Or should I, or could I, kind of thing. And it's about, I share my own experiences so that they get comfort from that. But beyond that, I tell them, unless you sort of go beyond that, stop questioning yourself. Worst that can happen is you'll fail. But that's a learning as well, right? So it's okay. It's okay. As long as you've tried your best, it goes back to my childhood thing. As long as you've tried your best, no one can find fault with you. I will back you up, right? Just give them that confidence to explore things and also to make mistakes, because that's how you learn. You can't do things perfectly all the time. So I think I'm not even going to say that it's my female team members or male team members, anyone who comes to me with doubt, and they will. That's part of my role as their mentor as well. I think it's to acknowledge that it's fine to have that doubt, but let's not overthink it. Let's figure out how do we overcome it in terms of what is within your control,
Right.
and just day at a time. Don't.
Take it one step at a time.
One step at a time. As I said, there is always silver lining.
Dananjaya, to you, I mean, with what Nisreen adds, I mean, there comes a question if you have a person that you have to coach, and this person comes to you and says, like I told you before, like, I've got this, and now I'm self-doubting myself, but also I don't want to talk about it. And is that something that you like to think about in terms of image building? And is it like a healthy image building that you want to do and hush them up to say, rather not talk about it?
Well, I'll kind of reclassify that. Like the kind of leaders that I work with, they know that there is a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think they acknowledge, there's a broad acknowledgement of what the issue is.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is they don't have a more constructive narrative to see themselves in their current situation. So my work really revolves around working with leaders to look at an alternate narrative to help them become better leaders and accomplish what they want to accomplish. And I go back to kind of bringing back to what Minoli talked about, is also kind of helping them see different truths. It's not that one is false and another is true, different truths. Now, you pointing back at what you told me, you looked at me and said women work harder, right? Okay, it is true. But also do male farmers in Ampara who kind of plow their land for 18 hours a day. That is also true. But women tea pluckers in Nuwara who pluck tea also work hard. That is also true. So there are multiple truths. But what we do is, because we have a bias, we need to justify the situation we are in. We pick a truth that fits our narrative.
Are we telling ourselves a story?
That's right. We do tell ourselves a story,
Okay.
and we conveniently pick the truth that aligns with our bias. So a lot of my work revolves around helping people see other truths. This is true, but hey, here are a couple of other truths. And that's when you kind of reframe yourself.
All right. So, I mean, that's exactly what I mean, with a thick belt around you where you coach these people, it's an interesting question to ask you. Nisreen, walking back to you. I mean, how would it feel like you have a person seated right in front of you that says, hey, no, I've gone through this.
Mm-hmm.
I know it. And somebody comes to you and says, Nisreen, I've got this problem and I need questions to be answered. And you very beautifully said, I just help them and tell them to take one step at a time. But as a leader, sometimes these questions need to be answered there and then. But then, do you take your role back to taking it on a personal note, or just, sit down with them and speak to them in terms of their role and their, their results with whatever they're going through?
I'm just trying to think back to an instance where that could have happened, and it did. To be honest, it's. I don't have a answer that's a cookie cutter answer. I think it'll all depend on what kind of person that person is, how deep that doubt is. Is it temporary, or is this something coming from a deep-rooted, childhood concern or whatever? So I think just because I haven't had it doesn't mean someone else cannot have it, right? I have been lucky in my life and in my career. So I know this whole syndrome is also about not saying to yourself that you've been lucky, but in my context, it's in a different way that I'm saying it. But I think for everyone, what they are going through is their truth. Right? I think Dananjaya also said that. So it's about understanding, because you don't have to experience everything to be able to empathize, right? Because I mean, no one can have all experience so that you can deal with all situations. So it's about maybe trying to put yourself in that place and saying, okay, if I was there, how would I have dealt with it? And maybe suggest things, because I don't have the right answer. I don't think anyone does.
Are you going to try and dissociate yourself and then enjoy the moment? That's why you say take one step at a time. Enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Rather than just overthinking and putting yourself into the shell where you're already losing a lot. In the sense.
Again, as I said, it depends on the circumstance, right? So if it's a doubt that I can take away from them as their supervisor, I will try and do that, because that makes the journey easier.
Right.
If it's something that it's not within my control, then I would say something like that, to say, maybe it's not within anyone's control. So just take a step at a time. And there is always, if you work hard at something and if you truly believe that you have done your best, then you own it. Don't doubt it. Just own it, whatever the outcome is. It may not be perfect. It may not be what someone else expects of you, but set your own boundaries, set your own benchmarks, charter your own journey, right? If you do that, then the doubts will, I think, become lesser and lesser and lesser, where you would at some point in time look back and say, I'm happy. I'm happy with what I've done.
Are you happy now with the journey that you've really come through?
Yes, I do. I am, because I have, I think, learned to be, I have just forged ahead. So,
and overcome
all of that. Yes.
Dananjaya, I mean, if you have somebody that comes up to you and says, look, I mean, there is there's somebody seated right next to you and she says that, I think I've never gone through it.
Yeah.
I mean, and you start identifying issues, right? And this person you're coaching, right? How would you, let's just role play a little bit and say,
Well, I want to use a different type of language. I think coaching is generally characterized with this concept of identifying issues. It's not necessarily that you identify issues, right? So if it's Nisreen, a typical conversation would go as, hey Nisreen, what do you want to achieve in the next 10 years of your life? Who do you want to be? What's the ecosystem you want to be operating in? What's the lifestyle? So I need a very thorough understanding of what she wants versus what she needs. Right? It's like two different things, right? You can fall in love with an idea, right? I want to be the president of Sri Lanka. Well, I love the idea, right? But is it what I need? It's a completely two different things. So once you identify what you need, then it's a matter of talking with Nisreen and understanding what are her mental constructs. What are the constructive stories? What are the destructive stories? And it's about working with Nisreen to reframe the destructive stories in a more constructive way. Right, so I think it's more than an issue solution perspective. It's more of, hey, what is the story that will get you to where you want to go, and then pooling the evidence around it to help that person believe in that story. That's kind of what my approach is all about.
And you'll tell her.
I wouldn't tell her. It's something that she.
That's what I'm trying to get out, because you can't tell a person.
That's the difference. There's a difference in, see, if you tell somebody something, then it doesn't become a truth.
Yeah.
So they realize it, they internalize the truth, and then they start to believe in the story. And then they see the difference between what I believe versus what I believe now. And my role is more towards guiding them towards that journey. And it's natural for people who come to ask, hey, tell me what my problem is. Give me a solution. That is exactly what you shouldn't do. And that leads to instant gratification, but it doesn't lead to change.
Right. So you also, you speak, like you said, you speak to a lot of people outside Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
And you also brought in the fact that, we, I think here, do this certain thing where we start, talking about ourselves and tell ourselves a story, self-doubt ourselves. But what about the people outside Sri Lanka? Do they have the same conversations with you?
It's the same thing. Everybody has a story. Now, when I say story, it's not only a story of self-doubt. There are people who have stories of that are incredibly egotistic. They believe there's nothing wrong with them, right?
And yet,
sorry, I'm like worried now.
Not in any way what Nisreen said.
are you going to take that back?
I'm in denial then.
No, not at all. I think maybe a better way to articulate it is kind of like if there are personalities that are completely oblivious to any form of vulnerability, right? And those are very dangerous stories because you actually believe you can do things and get away with it without any consequences. So it's not always a story of lack of confidence. It's not whether the story is good or bad. Is your story productive to take you to where you want to go? That's the right way to look at an internal narrative and an internal story. And depending on where you want to go, that story can be extremely in an extreme or balanced in the middle, right? So, for example, if you want to be the greatest athlete in the world, let's say the swimmer in the world, right? And there is no balanced life there. You can't have a narrative of a balanced life because greatness and failure are two extremes. At both extremes, you have sacrifice. If you want to get to the 0.001% of your craft, you've got to sacrifice. There is no balanced life. So if you have a narrative of, hey, I want to live a balanced life, that's going to be absolutely not constructive to get you where you want to get to. Conversely, there might be somebody who wants a balanced life, but is overcompensating, saying, I need to work 24 hours a day to get there. But that's what they want, but what they need is a balanced life. Then it's about changing the narrative.
So since it's about Women's Day, I would like to ask a question that's just out there. I mean, and everybody would also ask this question, like, how is anyone, in your life, Nisreen, that has always inspired you other than your mom or your siblings, anybody that always has been? Because I think I've got 2-3 that I would not want to name, but
actually, it's not my mom is one person who has inspired me, but my grandmother actually, she was from a village in India, so like I'm second generation Indian. So she got married late in life. She was 23 and that was considered late in life. She left her country, came here, and she brought up 9 children, right? She was not educated. She could not read. She made sure all 9 children were educated, right? They were not financially secure, but they never went hungry. And I remember her as a person who was always very calm, right? She had this inner strength that, it was amazing. I mean, I have never seen a person like that. And they used to live in Kandy. And I think, like in our language, you call mother Ma, right? Everyone who knew her used to call her Ma. Her children, her nephews, nieces, whoever it may be, would call her Ma. And she had gone through tough times in life, but she always would be smiling. I don't know what it was about her, but I think this positivity of always thinking things will work out. Maybe I've just seen her as I grew up. And I don't think she ever dwelled on things that were not going well, but always looked at what was
the positive aspects,
side of it. So I think it's a bit of that in me as well that I have seen. And to be honest, I mean, I have met a lot of professional women. I have met a lot of successful women who made a lot of money, who maybe have had very successful marriages, whatever. But I think she stands out for me as someone I would aspire to be like.
What about you, Dananjaya?
Role model wise would definitely be my mom. I think I mean,
allowed to say
I said other than your mom.
I am completely comfortable being around strong women. I come from a family of strong women and a very matriarchal family, right? As opposed to very patriarchal. I think my wife is an entrepreneur. She's
Have to say the wife also to balance.
Absolutely. I mean, and a complete rest. She's an entrepreneur. She's the mother of my 3 kids. She's a partner to me, and then I draw very similarity with my mom because my mom's an entrepreneur as well, right? Whereas all of the entrepreneurial spirit that I have, and I still wish I could be half what my mom is, because really my understanding of what strength is from the feminine perspective really came from my mom. The male perspective was always there, right, from my school upbringing and so on. But then the real female flavor really came from my mom, my wife, strong aunts and around. So really comfortable being with strong women. So sometimes when the flip side of it is sometimes when women come and say, look, I'm having a tough time in a male dominated world, I can't relate to it because I come from a family of strong women and they never had any problem managing situations.
You're like, okay, how does that feel?
I do have that.
How does that feel?
Yeah, correct.
What about you, Minoli?
So I would have to say the same. It's actually my
Just see, like, okay.
Because they actually taught me the right values. I think that from a very young childhood, they used to tell, you have to know racism, all those correct values are very important, I think, towards what you build up to be.
I'm gonna there are exceptions, but I'm gonna generalize this, right? I think one of the permeating qualities of strong women, right, is this endurance, right? My mom is 76 and she's still at it. Whereas
she has so much of energy.
Yeah, right.
She would look after my children.
The second part of this is kind of whereas men, after a certain age, they kind of like wind down. They're like, oh, I'm done. Where's the cigar? They're like completely gonna retire. They go into that den, right? And that's kind of that.
I'm really hoping the dads don't see this today.
No, but
I stayed away from my parents because that was your brief. So I need to acknowledge this one thing. I think one thing my parents did really well, and I think because of that I respect them a lot, is that from a very early age, and this was like half a century ago, I'm 50 now, right? So during that whole period, they never, irrespective of what was happening around, my brothers and I were always treated alike, right? So there was this gender equality never even hit me until people started talking about it. So I never thought of myself in the context of being female, right? I was just me, right? That was one. And the second, like I said earlier, is about never benchmarking me against, or any of us against someone else, right? So it was never about being the best amongst this. It's about being the best you can be. Right? So that took actually a lot of pressure off us, and also conversely put a lot of pressure on us because you couldn't fudge anymore. Right? Because the only question you're going to be asked is, did you do the best you could? And if you haven't, then that's on you. Right? So I think we've had good people around us. I think the bottom line is that.
I'm also going to bring in the last part of what Nisreen said, it's on you, right? I think and I do this with my kids, it's like failing is okay.
Yeah,
it's okay.
There is a difference between failing and becoming a failure.
I think that's
you learn from
but
So
I think that's the whole. I mean, it's a great conversation that we've had. We've had 3 different perspectives, and we've come to a statement where we're saying that it's okay to fail, right? And it's okay to keep trying, and it's okay to keep telling yourselves stories and also reframing yourselves as a personality if you have to, and just step back up.
I think all 3 of us most probably have failures that we can talk about.
Yeah. Yes. So thank you so much, guys, and I hope that you guys actually had a fantastic time, and I hope that our people would actually get something out of this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
To build a career-long vision for a woman, it is very important that you stay focused and build a passion. Passion is what will keep you focused. Passion is what will drive you through the obstacles you will find in life. Sometimes you see women foregoing their vision just because they have a family, because they have children, and there are other elements that women are, have to look into. Then secondly, I think to have a long-term vision, you need to have the correct education to back it, right? So when you have the correct education and the passion, you're 50% done. Then of course you have to have the patience to gain the experience. That is learning from failing and learning from success. All those are learnings you take into life. So I think these three elements actually help me where I am today, because I am a mother of 4 children and I'm the head of marketing at Sri Lanka Insurance. To overcome adversity, I think the main attribute is confidence. So you need to build your confidence. How you build your confidence is through education, knowledge and experience. If you have these three elements, then you know and you will gain confidence. So you, at any adverse situation, you will actually overcome such situations because of your knowledge, experience and learnings you have gained from life, and your confidence in meeting it. Diversity is a great attribute actually in any context, because diversity brings in cross-cultural thinking, diversity brings in empathy and tolerance. So therefore it is very important that any workplace have tolerance for diversity and have an inclusive culture, right? So at the end of the day, Sri Lanka Insurance, we have 150 branches spanned across northeast and then down south, and we have cross-cultural segments we cater to, consumer segments we cater to, as well as our employees. If you take our employees, we have a cross-cultural employment card. So I think that brings in the best of SLIC. So I think it is very important to provide good products, empathical products, services, and by large to the society. The dynamics are changing in today's world, and we see a more equal opportunity, or even more equal opportunity given to women in society. Women are taking front seats and an equal status as men. Therefore, I think women should be ready to take up the challenge. To do that, you need to be financially independent, emotionally independent, and intellectually independent. So acquire the right knowledge, experience, and be confident. Confidence will gain you the place that you want in society and the atmosphere to pursue your passion. At Sri Lanka Insurance, we are assisting the empowerment of women in society, and as an initiation towards this aspect, we have launched ladies only Motor Plus motor insurance product exclusively for ladies, taking into consideration their busy lives and the work-life balance.
Hi guys, welcome to Echelon's She Slays, and I am going to be asking a few quick rapid fire questions, and I think I'm going to talk to Dananjaya first. Hi Dananjaya, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you for having me.
All right, let's start with, were you given any nicknames by your friends?
I was given, well, you know, when I was schooling, the nickname is generally an abbreviation of the surname, so it was just Hetti. Hetti was my Hetti was my son. So it's Hettiarachchi. So my abbreviated name was Hetti.
Pretty cool. What's your favorite emoji? I know it's a wrong question Gen Z, but
I don't have a particular affinity to emojis, but
like let's think about going
Right.
to your WhatsApp, and then if you're texting somebody.
I'll probably be fist bumping. Yeah, my general acknowledgement of everything is like a fist bump.
What is the future for young women today?
I think it's bright. I think from where we were to where we are now, if it's one word that I could sum it up in, it's just bright.
What is your deepest fear?
My deepest fear is probably becoming a politician.
Okay, all right.
Is my deepest fear.
If I had to ask you, if you would recall, because I know that you travel quite a lot, right? Recall a word in another language.
Yeah, I think it would probably be arigato. Loosely translated, thank you in Japanese.
What was your last advice to somebody?
My last advice to it was just my wife when I just came today.
Just today.
Yeah, just today. It was like, don't think about it, just do it.
That's very blunt, like I have thought
That's like very open-ended.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
That
like-
could mean anything.
Don't think about it, just do it.
we're talking about inspiring women and like just do it. Don't think about
It was
it.
inspiring because she was asking for advice, right? And I'm
Okay.
like, don't think about it. You got this, just do it.
I mean, I should ask. I wish she was here to ask the question as to how do you feel.
I'm pretty
you
sure
know, waking up.
when this goes online, she'll probably put a comment somewhere.
Words of wisdom given to you by your mother or your grandmother. Anything that you've taken forward.
Okay, my mother was a career woman, just like me. So she used to encourage me and then tell that you should be true to yourself and go for it.
As a woman, what do you expect in a leader?
Okay, very tough one. Okay, as a leader, I would think you have to be genuine, compassionate, but tough in what you have to put out there.
How do you balance your work and your life? Because we chatted and I know that you have a very
Yeah, I think that is very challenging actually, because I have 3 young children and I'm very ambitious. Like I have always been, even when I was in school, I used to excel in my academic work. So it was like working was sort of something that I had to do. I could never be out of it. So I used to, somehow balance both well, I guess.
What motivates you the most?
I think it's about having a goal and achieving it, and doing something well. That motivates me. It's not about just getting the job done, but doing it well.
What is happiness to you?
Time with my nieces and nephews. I love that. In the kitchen, just cooking. Or
So you love
goodness.
cooking.
Yes.
What was your favorite show growing up?
I loved Friends. I loved the interaction between the people, the dynamics between 6 of them. So that would be one of my favorites. I still can watch it anytime. Yeah.
I think everybody loves it.
Yeah.
HNB has a sort of inclusion policy to include women and provide them a better sort of participation in the SME sector. In any country, SME, consists of the major portion, say about 70 to 80% in their entire GDP. So therefore, in that context, in Sri Lanka, we understand that, a bank like HNB, which is a systematically, important bank, needs to support the SME in a greater way. And also that if you look at the population, the statistics, we know that, women consist almost half of, the population. So there comes a lot of talent, a lot of skills that are, needed by our industries. And also, HNB, through its policy, we want inclusion of women in our economic activities. So therefore, it is quite critical that we have a good gender balance, even in our stakeholders, whether it's a customer base or whether it's our staff, so whatever it is. Apart from whatever the core business that they are involved in, they have to improve their skills in relation to the HR, the production, then whatever the logistics, then IT, all these sectors. But we know that SMEs has a bit of a weakness where traditionally most of these the SME customers, especially women, are not exposed to all these disciplines, all these skills that they need to improve. So therefore, there is a huge responsibility towards banks like us that we have some structured, program to improve those skills that are needed by them. So having said that, what we have done is, we have developed some of the products which would, sort of stimulate the skills, improve the skills on a progressive basis in those areas that I've told. Now, for example, like, we have products, supporting the the finances, then the logistics, collection of funds, managing HR, then customer relations through the CRM system. So likewise, we have provided many products. Apart from that, we have capacity building programs that we run, having partnered with many experts in the industry, and also some specific focus programs such as and products like for the exporters, where you need a lot of expertise in terms of how to do financing, how to do logistics, how to find markets, so on and so forth. So all our SME products that HMB offers does not only confine to the capital funding or the working capital funding that is needed by women SMEs, but we ensure that we provide this range of products and services so that whatever the gaps that women entrepreneurs need to fill can be fulfilled through those products.
There is injustice happening, and how do you stop it? You have to do something about it. But when you're a child, you don't know how. It's just vague.
We have here in She's today Ambika Satkunanathan. She's a human rights advocate and popularly known as a human rights activist. She was also a human rights commissioner at Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. Welcome to the program, Ambika.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let me ask you first, what made you to be here? I mean, be what you are doing now?
Right, I suppose working on human rights.
That's exactly.
Driven a lot by my personal experiences. Because living in Sri Lanka, I have personal experience of conflict, violence, 83 riots, those things which are patchy memories that you can't quite remember, but it's still there. And the fear of violence, those were all very real at certain points in my life. And I think the sense of injustice, there is injustice happening, and how do you stop it? You have to do something about it. But when you're a child, you don't know how. It's just vague. It's only as you grow up, when you go to university, you figure out. So like, I think many people, I also had this, and I've come across many young people who want to do, what do you want to do? I want to work for the UN, because people think by going to the UN, you can bring about world peace and protect human rights. I too thought like that at one point. Now I realize my naivete. But then that's how I got started, and I started working in Sri Lanka with Dr. Neelandri Chelvam, and I think that was very important, particularly because of certain values that I learned from him. So in a sense, I think, and the way that he nurtured and mentored young people, who he helped and wanted them to go out and do good in the world. I think that is very important, to give that support to young people. I think those are things that what drove me, and also working with Dr. Richelvam is what helped me get on the path of it, or to figure out, okay, I want to do this, but now I also know how to go about it.
And you have seen a lot of challenges in society, especially a society like in Sri Lanka. Why do you think that, there is so much of resistance in Sri Lanka for, liberal democracy?
Well, I mean, lots of people would probably disagree with you and say, oh, we are a great democracy, one of the oldest democracies in the region, etc. But I think we really haven't internalized those values of democracy. What does it mean? About elected representatives being held accountable. They're not demigods. We should challenge them, ask questions. But here they're treated like demigods and they're worshipped. There is a culture of patronage, right? They dispense patronage. They give jobs. They give something. So that is the kind of relationship that the voter has with the elected representative. So immediately you create a vast, that inequality which already exists. That just becomes larger. And we are still kind of a feudal society. We really don't believe in equality and equity, because even the way that we perhaps treat people who work for us, who do domestic work for us, the terms we use to refer to them, etc. So I think we claim we are an electoral democracy, yes, technically a democracy, but the problem here is people believe that their role as a citizen ends when they cast the vote. Usually that's when it's beginning, because it's your role as a citizen to hold the government accountable from one election to the next, right? So I think those are some of the reasons. And also just turn, you must listen to your elders. And so it means like whether what someone says is wrong or correct or sexist or it's a derogatory remark, they are told that they can't ask questions, right? And also we have quite a bit of casual sexism in society. There's casual racism in society. What certain communities, the kind of names they call them in this very casual way. So those are, I think, all reasons why I would say, yes, we are a democracy, but we're not an equal, equitable society where everyone has equality of opportunity, where if there is everyone is treated in an equitable manner. No.
Yeah, one important point you raised is this feudal society, and also it comes with this identity politics. Now if you see the politics in Sri Lanka for decades, it has been divided into race and religion, right? How do you see the survival of this liberal democracy in a society like this?
And this is something, what you say, Shihar, is something that we also see in many countries, right? Ethno-nationalist politics, ethno-nationalism, and using the ethnic card or the religious card to garner votes, and even the caste card. That is something else that we don't talk about in Sri Lanka, but which does exist under the surface, right? So I think this is something that you see particularly in this region, you definitely see this. And that is a problem, because that, I think, is also an obstacle to, in a way, internalizing liberal values. Definitely an obstacle, and also it is something that is used to further create conflict between communities, to incite violence against communities. We have seen that with what has happened, people, members of the Buddhist clergy inciting violence against the Muslim community, right? And the hate speech to which the Muslim community has been subject the last several years. And if you're a Tamil and you're talking too much, perhaps, then, or you're criticizing the government, then the other word comes, LTTE, then you're an LTTer. So that's how in real life, in everyday life, how ethno-nationalist politics comes into play, and how it really has an adverse impact on the individual and your ability to access even like opportunities, right? Because of your ethnicity or religion, you could get discriminated. You could be subject to violence, and we've seen that happen, and we see it happen every day. So definitely, that is a huge impediment to internalizing liberal democratic values.
Okay, I mean, I think you have already answered this question directly, like how it's going, how it's having an impact on minorities, right? But how can minorities manage in this kind of a feudalistic society and also identity politics? How can they manage and survive? In other words,
yeah, I mean, minority communities or the Muslim and Tamil communities haven't had a great time here, especially not lately also. How do they manage? Oh God, tough question. Of course, they continuously have to challenge the state, but challenging to demand for their rights to be respected and to be treated as equal citizens, because that's not happening. That is difficult because that can also make them vulnerable. It can make them vulnerable to violence. It can make them vulnerable to discrimination. So therefore, I think it is also important for communities to come together and to demand for the rights collectively as well, because any positive change, substantive change, is often brought only through collective action. And I think it's very important also for the majority community in this country to be aware that this kind of discrimination does happen. And it is nothing like, people feel it's a loss of face to accept that it does, but the fact is it does. And it also happens in many other countries, right? So to accept it, and I think the majority community is also needs to understand that only if other communities are able to live in a fair and equal society without fear, without being discriminated, that you can also have a peaceful country where there is socio-economic development, etc. Because, any society that keeps one part of society oppressed really does not develop. That's what history has also shown us. There is always conflict and violence, etc. It's a cycle.
Okay, in this context, as a human rights defender, how do you see moving forward?
This is not a friendly environment. It's quite hostile for human rights defenders in many ways, because people are personally attacked. People are personally summoned to be questioned at various state security agencies, civil society organizations, particularly in the north and the east, receive visits from several security organizations asking them what they're doing. If you protest, there will be surveillance. If you protest, you may be arrested. We have seen trade unionists who've also been arrested, etc. So it's an environment that is quite oppressive. And therefore, for human rights defenders, it is a difficult environment because they are struggling for or working towards ensuring that other people who are in a far more vulnerable situation, that their rights are protected. But at the same time, the defenders themselves are under different forms of attack. So they have to protect themselves so that they can continue for another day to do the work to help really vulnerable and marginalized communities. So it's a struggle. I would say I'm actually very privileged. I always tell people, check your privilege. That's important. I'm very privileged in a sense. I have more protection than many others, right? Because of who I know or the positions I've held, etc. There are defenders in remote villages, environmental activists. There are defenders in the conflict-affected areas who are far more vulnerable, whose name many people don't know, right? Who don't have connections to seek protection or people voicing for them if they are under attack or threat. So I would say those are the people that we must identify and speak for, because especially those of us who have the privilege of, yes, we might be under attack, but compare me to someone else, I'm far more privileged and protected in that sense, right?
And we have seen this topic of human rights, especially during the final stage of the war and after the end of the war. And it's being used and abused, right, in local and international arena. How important it is for you? How important it is for you to be a human rights activist?
I would like to actually just maybe answer that slightly differently, to say how important are human rights? Actually, human rights are important for everyone. And I'll give you lots of examples from interesting ones from when I was at the Human Rights Commission. There were several people who were anti-human rights, who used to call human rights defenders as, NGO Kaka, or as people who are spies for foreign countries and various things, OLTT or whatnot. But when their rights were violated, where did they come? They came to the Human Rights Commission, right? I don't want to name names, but big names. They came to the Human Rights Commission. So when their rights are being violated, they want them to be protected. So then they want the commission to function. They want defenders to speak on their behalf. But only when the defenders are saying something that is inconvenient to them or that is critical of the government they support, then they attack. So, but what people must realize, and I think those people still haven't realized, the ones who came to the commission, that rights are important for everyone, because you never know when you might be in a position of vulnerability. Therefore, I think it is something that is important for everyone. And rights work is not this big dramatic thing you do, no? It is something that you also do every day. I talked about democracy. People talk about democracy, but they wouldn't think twice about giving 500 rupees to the traffic cop. Oh my God, some ministers, 60 million corruption, everyone is outraged. But no one thinks twice about giving 500 rupees to the traffic cop. But that's also where it starts. It's it's part of the same ecosystem. So it's also about, I think, rather than people don't have to do something dramatic, it's about holding yourself accountable to the standards by which you want others to, function and abide by.
In other words, do you say, the human rights being politicized?
Human rights, firstly, politics is not a bad word. In Sri Lanka, it's become a bad word because we think about politics only about when it's linked to political parties. But that's a different kind of politics. But I think everyone should be political because your rights are about politics. Democracy is politics. You're not engaging in party politics, but you should be political in that you should care about what is happening in the country. So that's how I see politics. So I would say, when you say politicized, I would say that is in a way becoming subservient to party politics. Or it is a way that something is being weaponized against. But human rights is not being weaponized. It's people whose rights are being violated who are demanding that they be respected. That is being called politicized in a negative way. I don't think so. I think that's politics in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. And we have seen in the past, these human rights defenders coming up with, saying threats, physical as well as, verbal threats. How concerned are you on your own safety?
Mm-hmm. I've been getting this question quite a bit lately. I wonder why. As I said, what I told many people when they asked me this question is half humorously what I say, is, human rights work is not something that you do during, Yahapalana or something. You know what I mean? It's not. Human rights work is something that you do when rights are most under threat, when communities are most vulnerable. So in a sense, if you're saying you do human rights work, you have kind of signed up for it. That said, it's each person's choice, because each person has their own threshold, right, of how much threat they can or want to accept, and that is completely up to them. I would say I don't really think about it because, as I said, I think I'm more privileged than others, but at the end of the day, you really can't say, because you're just an individual going about doing your own thing. But I don't think about it in that way. And but the other thing that I tell people, I know mothers of the disappeared. I know human rights defenders, my colleagues, many in the North and the East, working for small community organizations who experience so much on a daily level in terms of surveillance, in terms of harassment, intimidation, visits, being summoned, etc., right? And they go through that and they do their work and they hold their head up high. So when they do that, can I say, oh my God, I am so frightened when I have so many privileges that they don't have, right? So that's how I would answer your question.
Yeah. Being a woman and being from a minority community, is it different being a human rights activist?
Absolutely.
Compared to others?
Absolutely. And I think that is important for us to recognize, that different parts of a person's identity can result in a person having different types of experience. So your religion, your ethnicity, etc., and if you're a woman, will impact how you experience something as opposed to someone else. So being a minority or a Tamil woman means that for the good part of last more than about 10 years, more than 10 years, I would say, I've had at random times when people don't like what I'm saying, I've had this label of LTT thrown at me. And I'm not the first one. Radhika Kumaraswamy has had thrown at her. Dr. Neelan Tiruchelvam had it thrown at him, right? So it is a weapon that is being used. But at the same time, my experience as a Tamil means I have experience of violence. I have experience of fear of violence. I have experience of different forms of discrimination. Right? And even when I was at the commission, the fact that I was a Tamil meant that there were certain things that I experienced that others did not, where there were anonymous letters written about me that targeted ethnicity, right? And because I was a Tamil, this whole LTT thing being circulated by some people. So yes, all that happened because I am a Tamil, and some of it happened also because I am a woman, because some of those attacks were gendered attacks. Right? So definitely, but I think that experience is something that also helps me be more sensitive to what others might be going through, because I can also see their different identities and how that makes them vulnerable to different forms of discrimination, marginalization, attacks, etc.
Now we are going to face another round of human rights sessions next week, starting from next week. How do you see Sri Lanka's human rights situation?
Well, I think...
is it kind of really deteriorating, or do you have any hopes?
Well, I don't think, if we're in this kind of work, we can't say we don't have hope, no, because if we don't have hope, we really should not be here. But sometimes it's hard to hold on to hope. I'll be real. I'll be honest and say it's difficult. Because, economically, we see so many economic challenges that people face. Poverty, people being unable to feed their children, 3 meals a day. All that is happening in real life. I mean, I know people and I've talked to people who do experience that. We also see freedom of expression being curtailed, activities of civil society being curtailed. And we do see that the government appears to be intolerant of differences of opinion, of opposition, of criticism, of talking about human rights violations. So that is not a good thing, right? Because when the government was in opposition, they also talked about their rights, didn't they? They did. And I think some of them came to the commission also. So clearly human rights are important, as I said. It's not just when you're in power. Human rights are important not just when you're not in power, but also when you're in power, right? So I would say, yes, many rights are not freedom of expression, freedom of association, and also police violence, police brutality is something that is systemic. That is not unique to this particular government or anything. That has happened for decades. The Prevention of Terrorism Act, decades. Prison violence, decades. So we have sexual and gender-based violence. Those are systemic problems that have existed for a long time that we are yet to tackle in a meaningful way. And into that, if you have also an oppressive environment, that makes it far more difficult to address these root causes.
And we have seen, Ambika, right, the government, saying that, some of these human rights organization and defenders complaining, to international forum like UN, like either to bring resolution against Sri Lanka or, use trade concession like GSP plus as a leverage. Now, your name was also there in a statement by, the government. So, I mean, how do you see this? Like, should really this human rights organization, use, that kind of complaint to win the human rights?
Thing is, people go to the UN or wherever different mechanisms only when they feel that their rights are not being protected in the country, when they feel that their own government is not listening to them. I said this in an interview last week, is that in a way it is sad that we have to. The fact that we have to go to the UN and ask for this is sad, because that means our government is not doing its job of protecting our rights. Because whether I voted for you or not, you're still my government because I am a citizen. And as a government, you do need to protect my rights. That's your responsibility. So the fact that people are forced to go is sad because they have no other means. Now look at the Cardinal. What did the Cardinal say? He said he wants to go out to seek assistance from international mechanisms. Why? Because he feels that justice has not been done for the victims of the Easter Sunday attacks. So and even the current Prime Minister, when he was in the opposition, he took files of disappeared persons and he himself went to Geneva, right? Why did he do that? Because, he felt that at that time there was no remedy here. The other reason why people go to international mechanisms, it's also to publicize what is going on. And to publicize meaning, if you don't make it public, no one will know these violations are happening, right? And no one will know that there are victims of these violations. Those stories will be forgotten and they will be buried. Now, so many journalists were killed. Now, if every year, people didn't bring up their names, Nimala Rajan, or, Lasantha Vikramatunga, or, if Prageet Ekneli Goda, if their names were not brought up, then people would forget about them, right? People would forget these wrongs happened. People would forget their families were impacted. People would forget that they never got justice, which is why they're repeated again and again to make sure people don't forget. And that not forgetting is also so that people learn lessons and don't make the same mistakes again. But regrettably, governments seem to be repeating their mistakes, right? So,
and just tell us, what do you see as positives, right, done by the government in terms of addressing the human rights issue so far? Maybe you can talk from the end of the war, from 2009. What has happened positive?
Yeah. Oh God, that's a bit tough. Because, after the war is when we saw the militarization increase, right? After the war, we saw that there was a denial of many of the violations that took place in the war. They should have taken the opportunity. There was an opportunity to acknowledge the violations, to inquire into violation, to give justice if we really wanted to achieve sustainable peace. Instead of which, they tried to control the communities, tried to deny violations, and tried to consolidate power in a rather authoritarian manner, because many of the violations happened, even all the the extrajudicial killings of the journalists that I just mentioned now, enforced disappearances, things like that, and just a climate of fear. So I would say, rather than look to any government and say what they have done positive, I would like to say what I see generally positive in society is that, particularly over the last 2 years, I have noticed that younger people in particular really seem to they understand, or they're beginning to understand, what it means to be a citizen. That kind of civic consciousness, because they are challenging and questioning parliamentarians, the government. How much did you pay for this vaccine as opposed to that vaccine? Why did you do an environmental impact assessment before putting that, laying that road? So younger people seem to be really voicing out. They're using their voice to challenge, the state on public interest issues. Of course, there is also a lot of hate on social media, but at the same time, there's also this positive thing that I have seen of younger people really exercising their duties as a citizen, which I have not seen in a long time. And also younger people, while there are also younger people spewing a lot of hate, I do see younger people who understand historical discrimination, who understand what needs to be done to build bridges between the different communities. So to me, that is the positive thing, that these younger, and they can see the hypocrisy of politics. So that to me is really what I find heartening and positive.
Thank you, Ambika. Thank you very much for your insight and comments on on human rights, and all the very best on your future. And that's it from us for She Slays for this episode. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shahrazad. Join me as I speak to Chandi, Ruindu, and Sandra in our panel discussion on how to embrace women's superpowers in tech. Hoping to see you there.
We have Ambika Satkunanathan here at She Slays, and we are going to do rapid fire questions with her. Ambika, just give us a short answer on this. Who is your inspiration and why?
Inspiration, I suppose those who face immense challenges and difficulties and overcome them. People I see every day.
And if you were to write a book, what would it be about?
Why we should abolish prisons.
What would you say to younger self and child self?
To trust your instinct and not to underestimate yourself.
What are the things you don't like?
I don't like dishonesty. I don't like mediocrity and lack of integrity.
And what's your favorite emoji?
Rolling of the eyes, which I have been told I do in real life too.
And what are you most grateful of?
Grateful for all the opportunities that I've obtained throughout life. Really grateful for that.
What is the future of young women today?
The future can be bright, but the future can also be rather challenging for them, because regrettably, a lot of things in society like patriarchy have not changed. So they still have to battle different things to what we battled, but still considerable challenges.
And what advice would you give to youngsters who are taking a step?
I would say first thing is to to also have a sense of civic responsibility. Because if you do want society to improve, and you want politicians to be better, you want the country to be better, you've got to start with yourself and what you contribute to your community.
In your own words, describe feminism.
Feminism is about freedom of choice in every aspect of life. Freedom of choice and having equal opportunities.
And if you are allowed, what other jobs would you take instead of what you are doing now?
Actually, I think this is what I am meant to do. So I can't think of what I might do.
How do you people see women as leaders today?
I think they still don't, which is the problem. They still actually truly don't accept women as leaders because in many sectors like politics, the parliament, even the government sector, state sector, etc., the number of women in positions of power and decision making are still quite low.
How do people understand feminism, in your view?
I think people wrongly understand feminism as anti-men.
Do you experience resistance when you lead men?
Yes and no. Yes and no, I would say. Sometimes it depends on the persons, because I have encountered people who really do not like a woman being in a position of power or decision making and giving them instructions on what to do.
And what do you wish you learned sooner?
How to let go of your ego.
What would you say to someone who is really going, hardship?
I would say don't tell them anything. Instead of that, just try to see how you can assist. Because people give advice, but I think what someone in difficulty most needs is support.
Women today.
The future can be bright, but the future can also be rather challenging for them, because regrettably, a lot of things in society like patriarchy have not changed, so they still have to battle different things to what we battled, but still considerable challenges.
And what advice would you give to youngsters who are taking a step?
I would say first thing is to also have a sense of civic responsibility. Because if you do want society to improve, and you want politicians to be better, you want the country to be better, you've got to start with yourself and what you contribute to your community.
In your own words, describe feminism.
Feminism is about freedom of choice in every aspect of life. Freedom of choice and having equal opportunities.
And if you are allowed, what other jobs would you take instead of what you are doing now?
Actually, I think this is what I am meant to do. So I can't think of what I might do.
How do you people see women as leaders today?
I think they still don't, which is the problem. They still actually truly don't accept women as leaders because in many sectors like politics, the parliament, even the government sector, state sector, etc., the number of women in positions of power and decision making are still quite low.
How do people understand feminism, in your view?
I think people wrongly understand feminism as anti-men.
Do you experience resistance when you lead men?
Yes and no. Yes and no, I would say. Sometimes it depends on the persons, because I have encountered people who really do not like a woman being in a position of power or decision making and giving them instructions on what to do.
And what do you wish you learned sooner?
How to let go of your ego.
What would you say to someone who is really going, hardship?
I would say don't tell them anything. Instead of that, just try to see how you can assist. Because people give advice, but I think what someone in difficulty most needs is support.
Hi, I'm Nikita Samaratunga, and I'll be in conversation with Samadani Kiriwandeniya talking about empowering through financial inclusion on She Slays by Eshwan.